A blessed evening to all. It is truly amazing to come together and worship the Lord and thank Him for His goodness that He has been displaying in each one's life. And I believe we are here to honor Him, to thank Him, and at the same time to listen to His Word, that there might be something that we could bring in our day-to-day existence. I have been preaching the Word of God for almost 20 years, yet it's still very vivid to me. The very first time that I stood behind the pulpit, around almost 20 years already, there at the smaller church of Zikaek. A few months earlier, Pastor Rosalita told me, I want you to be exposed at the main church, because I was holding the young people back then. And usually in those days, youth pastors were not allowed to preach at the big church. So I was here for quite some time, about 3 or 4 months already, when he said, I wanted to be exposed at the big church. Well, he knew me even by then because I was a student in Ebenezer. And so I accepted the challenge. And I studied a lot for that preaching event because it was my first time. And I was trying to get all the necessary things and looking at the different aspects of the text that I'm studying so that I would be ready to proclaim the word. And behind my mind was something that was not so good as a motivation for a newbie preacher. I knew that Dr. Ben De Jesus was attending the worship services, and I knew that Pastor Ira Rosalita, Dr. Rosalita, would sit at the front. So I said to myself, for the very first time that you will preach before the congregation, there would be Dr. Ben and Dr. Rosalita. He wasn't a doctor back then, si Dr. Ira. And I said, it was time for you to impress them about what you have. I knew it was not a good motivation, but I didn't know why I thought that way. So I was ready, I studied a lot, and that day came. I stood up in front of the congregation and I saw Dr. Ben somewhere in the middle of the congregation at the right fuse. And then Dr. Rosalita was seated at the front of the left fuse, left of mine, of the speaker. And when I stood up there, I held my manuscript. And then I looked at them from the right to the left, from the left to the right. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start the preaching. And the only thing that I had back then was, I could still remember, I lost totally my confidence. I lost the courage to proclaim the Word of God. And right at that moment, my goal of leaving an impression to Dr. Ben and to Dr. Rosalita totally vanished. It was replaced by another goal. My goal that time was just to finish the sermon because I was so scared at the front. Well, that reality can happen to anybody in any occasion, in any field. One young man would apply for a job. He's so confident about what he can give and offer to the company. And his goal is to make money and to create impression before the people who's going to work with him. The problem was, the very first day of the job, he was insulted by a customer. And because of that, he lost his confidence, and his goal of making an impression before his co-workers is totally gone. And the next thing that he's thinking is, I want to quit my job. It can happen to anybody. It can happen in a singing contest, wherein one of the contestants would say, my goal is to get the trophy. That's my goal. And I'm so confident because I got a lot of experiences already singing before the crowd. And that singer stood up before the judges and he started singing with a wrong note. At the very next set of seconds that he had on stage, 2 things happened. He lost totally his confidence and he changed his goal. His goal of getting the trophy, getting the championship title, to just ending the singing because he was so scared and he was so ashamed. That can happen to you in your field. That can take place at any time. But here is a guy in the Bible that I am so much impressed because he faced so many adversaries. He dealt with so many sufferings and trials. He lived his life several years under pressure, under tension, extreme tension. And yet, he never lost his confidence. He never lost his courage and confidence. And he never got derailed from his goal. So let's learn from this guy. I believe every one of us has something to learn from this guy named Paul. Okay? So let's look at the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 6 to 10. I'll read from the NASB 1995 edition. 2 Corinthians 5, 6 to 10, it says here, "Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are of good courage, I say, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether at home or absent, to be pleasing to Him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed by his deeds in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad." May the good Lord bless the reading of His Word. The author of this was the Apostle Paul. Paul was so much acquainted of sufferings. But he started his life as an adult as a persecutor of the early church. Of all the people in Jerusalem back then, the believers, the followers of Jesus, those who were called the Way, that was the first name for Christians. They were called the Way. You can read that in the book of Acts. And then later they became Christians. And of all the people in Jerusalem, of all the religious leaders, Paul was the person that Christians didn't like at the very early part of the history of Christianity. Why did I say that? Because Paul was very zealous in running after Christians. He persecuted them. He made life so hard for them. He did not only go to them and question them and created a commotion in the midst of them. He really literally persecuted them both verbally and physically. So anybody, if you are a believer at that time, you wouldn't like to be in the very presence of the Apostle Paul, but he wasn't apostle back then yet. He was called Saul. This guy was a persecutor of the early church. But he met Jesus. And you know what Jesus is so master of? He is so good at changing lives. That's what my Lord can do. He's so good at it. He changes lives. Even if the worst sinner would come to him, he has the capacity to change that person's life. And what happened next was Paul became a believer, a follower of Christ, and he started preaching the gospel. And when he started preaching the gospel, those against Christianity started persecuting him. So there is now a turnabout of the situation. Paul was a persecutor, now he was persecuted. Okay? That was the experiences of Paul. And if you look at his writings several times, you would see there how he suffered. In fact, if you look at chapter 4, verse 11, let's look at that verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 11. Look at what Paul said here. "For we who live are constantly being delivered over to death." This was how he described his experience. As if day by day, as he lived his life as a preacher of the gospel, he was as if delivered to death every day. So his life was endangered several times. Thus, it is safe to say that Paul was so much acquainted of suffering. Paul was so much acquainted with pressure, tension, difficulty, storms in life. He knew all of those things, not only by knowledge, he knew all of those things by experience. And yet, despite all of those experiences, those acquaintance of realities of life that he had, you know what he said here in the text that we read? He remained immovable as far as his confidence or his courage is concerned. By the way, I will interchangeably use the word courage and confidence in our discussion tonight because in the text, it is using the word courage. But I look at the original language, the courage is understood as confidence in the Lord. Okay? So let's understand that idea. Paul, in the midst of the adversity of life, in the midst of all the sufferings and the storms that he went through, he remained immovable because his ultimate confidence is on what he wrote here in verses 5 to 8. Let's read it. Verses 6 to 8, he said, "Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight." Listen to this main statement of this long sentence. "We are of good courage, I say, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord." The very reason why Paul remained immovable with his confidence or courage is the fact that he knew for certain that his confidence is anchored on the fact that he belongs to Christ, and whatever happens to his surroundings, whatever happens to his life and body, at the end of the day, he'll go to him. He knew where he will go. If you watch a movie, it's as if you knew already what's the end of it. So even if there is like nahihirapan yung protagonist sa beginning ng movie kasi binubugbog siya ng mga antagonist, you knew that at the end of the movie, the protagonist will be victorious over the villains. It's on that same sense that Paul understood full well that even if he would experience suffering with his surrounding this time, even if he would experience persecution, he knew for sure that at the end of the day, his soul will go to God. Recently, I received a query from a lady. The lady said, "Pastor, this has been boggling my mind for quite some time, and I don't know the answer to this question." And I said, "What's your question?" She said, "I am actually wondering, where will my soul go right after my death?" She said, "I knew that my body would go to the ground. Because no matter how beautiful or handsome you are, when you're dead, when we are dead, we will brought to a funeral parlor. And the embalmer would take care of us, right? Or, if there is already a crematorium here, we will be burned. And immediately our body will turn into dust. But if we'll be brought to a funeral parlor, then our family, our loved ones, would look at us while we are inside a coffin. And then after maybe 5 to 10 days, they'll bring us to the cemetery. So whether we like it or not, we'll still go back to the ground." And she said, "I understood about what will happen about my body. But I really do not know what's going to happen with my soul." Have you wondered about that question? That if I happen to die later, maybe an hour later, what's going to happen to my soul? And I asked her, "What do you think?" And she said, "I really do not know, but I heard some people saying that my soul would roam around the earth." Wow, free trip with free ticket, free travel all over the world. Nakakatakot naman yun na maliligo ka sa banyo, may soul na gumagala doon, na ninilip sa'yo. But in a short way, I don't see any biblical verse that would support that idea. That when we die, our body would go to the ground and our soul would move around the planet. Maybe people are celebrating 40 days after the person's death or burial. Why do we do that as part of our tradition? I suspect that people got that from the experience of Jesus Christ, because it took 40 days before he ascended to heaven. So probably people are thinking that when a person dies, we are like Jesus, that we move around the earth for 40 days before we go somewhere. But that's not true. It only happened for Jesus. Why? Because on the third day, He resurrected. So when He moved around, when He showed Himself to His disciples, He was not a ghost. He was a resurrected body. He was just like before He died. He was even better than that. So He was not a ghost, and we cannot compare ourselves with what He experienced. Here are two views that theologians are looking at. One of the views about what will happen to the soul of the person when we die. First is what they call the soul sleep. Have you heard that line? Soul sleep. Meaning, when we die, our soul would sleep as if it's sleeping. And we will be awakened by the time Jesus Christ comes back. Where did that idea come from? I also do not know, but probably it came from the idea that Jesus viewed death as in the concept of sleeping several times in the New Testament. One time Jesus was called by a parent because a young girl was dead. And then Jesus went to the house of that person, and when He arrived, there were already flute players. In those days, when there was a dead person, the family of the dead person will hire flute players. And if there are flute players in the house, that would indicate that there is a dead person in the house. Okay? In our time, it's not like that. If you see people outside playing Tong It's 41, Chikicha, whatever is that cards that they're playing, there is a dead person inside. But in those days, there were no cards like how we do it today. So they played flute. And Jesus arrived in the place, and there were flute players. That would indicate that the person was dead. There was a dead person inside. And yet Jesus inquired. And they all laughed at Him because the girl was dead. And Jesus said, "No, she's just sleeping." And Jesus went into the house, and He awakened the girl. Another moment, Jesus was walking, and He met a parade. A parade not of living people, but living people bringing a dead body at the gate of the inn. And Jesus went to the child who's dead already, and He awakened her. Another thing, Lazarus was buried already inside a tomb. Jesus went to visit the tomb. What happened? Jesus called him as if a parent is calling a child or a young person inside his room. "Hey, wake up, come out of your room. It's time for breakfast." And Jesus went in front of the tomb, and He said, "Lazarus, come out." So there is an idea that in the way God or Jesus looked at a dead person, the person was just like seemingly sleeping, and He can wake them up. So probably people started thinking, when we die, we are just like sleeping. And when Jesus comes back, He will awaken us. Well, that's one of the views. But a more warranted idea about what's going to happen to our soul when we die can be traced back even when He died on the cross at Calvary. When He was crucified, both sides of Jesus were criminals. These two criminals represented every human being on the planet. One of them rejected Him, another put his faith in Him. The one who rejected Him said, "You save yourself and save us as well." But the other guy said, "Don't say that to him because he's innocent. For us, we are guilty. That's why we deserve this." And so he looked at Jesus and said, "Lord, remember me when you are in your paradise." What did Jesus say to him? Jesus told him, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Jesus did not say, "In the years to come when the world will come to its end, I will come back and I'll wake you up and I'll bring you to paradise." No. Jesus knew that 3 of them would die right at that day. After a few hours, they will all die. He was aware about the matter, and He told him, "Today." Meaning to say, when we give up our last breath, I'll bring you to paradise. Meaning, the soul of that criminal did not sleep. He was ushered by the Lord to paradise. Another scene in the Bible is the account of Lazarus and the rich man. When the both of them died, Lazarus was at the side of Abraham in the very presence of God. But the rich man was brought to a place in the New Testament, it's called Hades. Okay? It's called Hades if you look at the text. Hades is equal with the Hebrew name called Sheol. But it's not Gehenna. Gehenna is what we perceive as hell with all the fire. Gehenna is something that the soul who do not belong to Christ will be brought after the judgment day. But right after the person dies who don't have Jesus, he is brought to Hades. And this was the place where the rich man was brought to. So if you think about this, there is no intermediate state. That when we die, the righteous will go to paradise and the unrighteous, those who don't have Jesus, will go to Hades. And in this text that we read, listen to what Paul said. He said, "And knowing that while we are at home in this body, we are absent from the Lord. But by the time we are absent from this body, we are at home with the Lord." So there is no intermediate state. There is no gap between two periods. Once we leave the body, we are ushered to the very presence of the Lord. And this is exactly the mindset of Paul. You know what? You and I are very much concerned about our physical body. You and I are very much concerned about our existence on this planet, right? We take care of our physical body so much every day. We wake up, we comb our hair, we watch the mirror, and it's about our physical body. And then we brush our teeth, if you do, then it's still about our physical body. We prepare our breakfast, it's still about our physical body. After breakfast, we brush again, we take a bath, still about our physical body. So many things that we do in life has to do with our physical body. And we are very much concerned of this. Kaya nga every after New Year, meron tayong Balik Alindog program na gustong salihan. Because we are very concerned of our body. Well, it's good if we are concerned of this physical body that we have. However, never forget that this body we have is temporal. A temporary residence. Because there is something more permanent that God has prepared for those who trust in His name. And that exactly was the mindset of Paul, where he got his confidence and courage. He was telling the people around him, actually, you can malign me, you can hurl words that are painful to me, you can hit me physically, you can destroy my body, but at the end of the day, I would remain confident and courageous because I belong to Christ. Even if you take away my body, my soul will go to the feet of my master after all. So I'm not afraid. I would remain confident. Even if you put a black eye on my face, go for it. Well, I care for myself, but if I cannot stop you from doing so, go for it. Because at the end of the day, my confidence would remain anchored in my Jesus, because I belong to Him. You can hurt my body. You can hurt my feelings. But at the end of the day, you can never touch my soul. I belong to Jesus. The soul is more permanent. One time, I think it was Ravi Zacharias who was asked, "Do you believe that you have a soul?" He said, "I think you asked the wrong question. Because we are not a body that has a soul. We are a soul who has a body. We are a soul." And that speaks of eternity. And the confidence of Paul is anchored on that fact that he is eternally secured with God. His security, his confidence is not anchored on his profession. He was highly educated, but he said it's rubbish. It's not anchored on his godliness, his religiosity. No. He said it's only anchored on the fact that I belong to Christ. That's why in the midst of a storm in life, he remained confident and courageous because he knew where he belongs. Another issue here in the text has to do with his goal. We all have goals, right? We have a goal to increase our income next year probably. We have a goal to buy a brand new car 2 years later. We have a goal of building new house. We have a goal of achieving something in life that would make us proud about ourselves. We have a goal of visiting beautiful places. It's not bad to have a goal in life. It's good, in fact. But let's adopt the mind of Paul. While he has many goals, his ultimate goal is written in verses 9 to 10. Look at what he said here. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, listen to this. What was his ambition? Whether at home, agree with me. It's not bad to plan ahead and determine steps to conquer your dreams. It's not bad to envision yourself as a successful first person in your career. It's not bad to dream of visiting Japan during Sakura season, or known as cherry blossoms. It's not bad. It's not bad to do these things. It's not bad if you aim to build your own house with one room for each of your siblings or family members. It's not bad if you desire to have swimming pool at your backyard. It's not bad. It's not bad if you aim to buy a brand new car. It's not bad. It's not bad if you aspire to build your own business and employ hundreds of workers. It's not bad. It's not bad to aspire to be at the top during a licensure examinations. It's not bad to invest in a business that can multiply your wealth. It's not bad to dream to become a medical doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a teacher, or whatever you think you want to be. It's not bad. It's not bad to make a dream come true. It's not bad. It's not bad for parents to aspire to send their children to a prestigious school. It's not bad for students to aim for a perfect score during an examination. It's not bad for a mom to look forward seeing her son marching during a graduation. It's not bad. It's not bad for a dad to aspire to see his daughter surpass his achievements in life. It's not bad. But, take note of this, but each of these aspirations shall be filtered by our ultimate goal, which is to please the Lord Jesus Christ. But each ambition shall fall in a lower category of priority than pleasing Him who lavishes us with His grace and love every day. Yes, it's not bad if you aim for a very high score during your final examinations if you're a student. But if you spend the whole week without sleeping because you are studying your lesson, I think it's no longer pleasing to God. Because He created your body that is in need of a rest as well. It's not bad if you aim so high that you want to stay awake just to memorize everything. But if you start taking drugs to remain awake so that you can memorize those things that you want to memorize, it's not pleasing to God anymore. It's not bad to ambition to have a brand new car. It's not bad. But if you start resolving that I will do bad ways, I will engage in a corrupt ways of engagement in this business that I have so that I could have that car, that's a different story. So what I'm trying to tell you this time is this. It's good to have goals in life, but you must have an ultimate goal of pleasing God. And that ultimate goal becomes the lens by which we evaluate our other goals in life. It's not bad to have a goal to earn much money. It's not bad. But if your way of earning much money would destroy your body and will make you commit immorality, it's not pleasing to Jesus. Then set that aside. You see, our life goals must be evaluated by our ultimate goal. And our ultimate goal is to please Him who lavishes us with His grace and love day by day. Paul, in the midst of stormy experiences, he was never dwindled. His courage and confidence remained anchored in Jesus. His goal was focused on glorifying his Master. And if we adopt those things, I think we would live a life that is not only successful as far as human beings are concerned, but we live a life honoring the one who created us. May we adopt these two things that Paul adopted. First is that his ultimate courage, and ultimate confidence is anchored on the fact that he belongs to Jesus. And his ultimate goal is to please the Lord Jesus Christ, who lavishes him with his love and grace every day. Let's evaluate ourselves, and may we all follow these concepts that we bring glory and honor to him. God bless you all, and good evening.